they take that, this dangerous and unusual language, and then try to extend that to what they call assault weapons. An assault weapon is just a pejorative term. It doesn't really have any meaning. But I'm not going to get into the argument on like what is and is not an assault weapon. I know what he's talking about. I know what generally Americans are talking about when they say assault weapon. And there's nothing in the Heller decision that suggests that those can be regulated. In fact, the core language that says all commonly held firearms are presumably protected means that weapons like the AR-15, AK-74, and other weapons that are in common use for lawful purposes in this country are presumptively protected. I don't know how you get from one of the most common rifles in America and the court saying weapons in common use being protected to we can ban this. I'd be more than happy to have that discussion, but it's just not true.
Why do you own 4 machine guns?
I'm a collector. That's why I own them. But as far as why anyone else would own them, it's none of my concern. Do you own a car? It is your responsibility to decide to use that automobile responsibly and safely. Okay? You can't. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. You can't run people down with it. That's against the law. It doesn't matter what kind of gun you choose for whatever lawful purposes you have. Like I said, yeah, I own machine guns. I'm a collector. Somebody else may own machine guns because they believe that is the best way, the best way to protect their home. It's not up to you and I to decide this. It's up to them to make those decisions, and they have to be within the lines of the law.
Let's get to calls. John is in Hallsville.
About the decades-long nightmare of gun violence that seems to get worse and worse.
Your position.
Let's take a look at that pie chart that I handed over. When people talk about an epidemic of gun violence, they're being a little bit, they're not being honest with what the problem is. And this data is from, is not exactly from a source that's friendly to my position, but people are obsessed with mass shootings.
The
right?
CDC.
Yeah, exactly. People are obsessed with mass shootings. It's all they want to talk about. And all of these proposals they claim to be aimed at addressing mass shootings. The average American, and we've got a study that's going to be coming out soon that breaks down the data. We'll be making that available soon on our website. But the average American, the chance of being killed in a mass shooting is like 1 in 15.5 million. Okay, those aren't epidemic numbers. They're not. It's an incredibly rare, horrifying event. Okay, when you respond to that by writing policy to apply to a country of 300 million people, you're going to be really binding average people more. As far as 90% supporting it, that's garbage. The pollsters will say whatever you pay them to say. As what we've seen in the past, when they poll in states that are going to have a referendum, some sort of state popular election on mass shootings, generally the polls say something similar, 90%. And also generally, and you can see this is on the white paper that Firearms Policy Coalition put out on universal background checks, the majority of them were then defeated in the election. Okay, so that's just not true. As far as what universal background checks are about, people look at the name, they think it's a good name, right? They think, what could be wrong with that? This is what happens when you just want to do something, when the push to pass new policy is just to do something. You get laws like the Patriot Act, which seems right now like a good idea, but a few years down the line, we realize it's a horrible erosion of their civil liberties. How this applies to universal background checks, let me make a quick illustration. Let's say I have a son, daughter, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and they've just moved into a new neighborhood, and something weird is happening every night, like there's somebody knocking on their door at 3 a.m. or something like that. They're freaked out, all right? I know that person, they're close to me, I know that they're not a felon, I know that they can own a firearm, they don't have a firearm in the house, and I say, you know what? And I put a gun on the table and slide it over. I say, just hold on to this for a little while. I know that you know how to use this, just in case, all right? Let me ask a question. Should I go to prison? If the answer is no, then you might see the problem that I see with universal background checks. Anything universal that applies to all situations is going to be overly broad. It's going to catch people in the net. And the people who are most likely to be the victims of violent crime are the Americans who are below the poverty line and Americans who are minorities. And in every way, race, gender, and sexual orientation are the people most likely to be targeted, and thus the people most likely to have a need for a mechanism of defending themselves. And I do not think it is a moral answer to make it harder for these people to acquire a weapon.
We're talking with Matthew Larosiere,